Nurse Theorists, Portraits of Excellence. In this edition, we feature Dr. Jean Watson.
Well, I was born in West Virginia, which is known as the coal bin of the nation, and grew up in a small town called Welch, West Virginia. I had 4 older brothers and 3 older sisters, so my family was really a large family. It was interesting in that there were 4 boys and then 4 girls, and I was the youngest of the 4 girls, so I was the youngest in the family. My mother was a very talented woman, even though she pretty much was a homemaker all her life until after my father died. But she had the ability to be sort of the grande dame or the matron of the family and influenced everyone very strongly. She's still living and she's in her 90s. And my father worked with the Pontiac garage in West Virginia, in Welch, and was the supervisor of the cars as well as the maintenance. It was sort of dubbed the house by the side of the road because it was on a corner, and because I had older brothers and sisters, there were all these generations of different age groups that just made that their home. And all through my childhood, I can remember older friends of my brothers and sisters stopping by and wanting my parents to meet their boyfriend or the person they were going to marry, and they were always having parties, and we were sort of the center headquarters of a lot of spontaneous activities, and people would come by and they'd pack picnic lunches and go for bike rides, and it was just kind of the center of activity. Being a small town, that sort of needs to happen. There weren't a lot of cultural activities in where I grew up. In other words, there was no zoo, there was no art museum, there was 1 tennis court in town. And so what you did were high school activities or church events or things that related to doing things with families. And so that was the culture. I did very well in school. And I was on the honor roll, and I was on the honor society, but I was also a cheerleader. I was also in all kinds of clubs and involved in all the usual school events. When I was a junior in high school, my father died very suddenly of a heart attack. And that changed some of the direction of my life, I think, in that I had envisioned myself going to college, university, right out of high school and studying English literature, which was something I was interested in, and had applied and been accepted to college and was planning to go to this university in Florida, actually. And then after my father died, it changed some of the options that I had, and I had had some interest in nursing, and even going back and looking at my annual, I saw that I was in the nurses club. I don't remember being in the nurses club, but I guess I was. And it was sort of what women did then. You know, you could be a teacher, or you could be a nurse, even though that was true certainly with people before my generation. So that was sort of the norm, and so I ended up going to nursing school in Virginia. It was a very fine nursing school at that time, and Lewis Gale Nursing School and Lewis Gale Hospital had the reputation of providing the finest nursing care in Roanoke of any of the hospitals, so it was a very famous old historical place. But it was not an academic environment. There was no academic community. It was the old probationary clerkship type model of the Nightingale era, and I never liked that. And so I critiqued it a lot when I was there. And then I immediately had goals of going on to the University of Virginia after graduation from nursing school in order to get my degree. Roanoke was sort of a party place on weekends, so I had a chance to meet lots of different people and met my husband, Doug, there, and he was a student at Virginia Tech, and I was there at Lewis Gale.
I used to go and pick her up at the nurse's residence, and the thing that impressed me initially was that she used to carry around with her this sort of dog-eared copy of War and Peace. Another thing that has impressed me about Jean, my daughters would ask me those ultimate questions, like, what am I supposed to do with my life, things like that. And I would look wise and say, beats me. But what I would point them to, I'd say, just watch your mother, because Jean has this incredible ability to make use of every day and every moment sort of in a positive way. and we'd have 5 minutes to go out somewhere, and Jean would be at her desk finishing up a paper or something like that. So my answer to my children would be, there's a successful person, and the way she does it is just doing the best she can every day and in every minute almost. And when she set out, she didn't set out to be a nurse theorist. She just set out to do the best she could every day.
We went to Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and he went to law school. And then I had my first job, and I worked in surgery at Bowman Gray Medical School Hospital, which is Baptist Hospital. And that seems like an inconsistent place for me to work, knowing what I'm about now. But at the time, it was really exciting. We lived in student housing in the Wake Forest campus, and were involved with all the law school activities and a lot of the social and the community there. After his first year of law school and my first year of working as a nurse, we decided to come to Colorado and visit his family. And I had never been west of the Mississippi. And that's when we came out here, and he transferred law schools. Then I applied to go back to school, and it had all the opportunities that we wanted for ourselves personally and professionally. And we never went back. So we've stayed in Colorado since 1962. I have two beautiful daughters, inside and out beautiful, and a new grandson, Dimitri. Jennifer's my older daughter, and she's the one who lives in Portugal. And just recently visited her with the grandson, Dimitri. And she's been over there about 3 years, graduated from college about 3 or 4 years ago, and is a very talented writer and dancer, and now a mother. My other daughter, Julie, is still in college. She's at Bennington College, and she's an artist. And she has an artist personality, and she functions as an artist. Took a faculty position at the University of Colorado School of Nursing and worked with all different levels of the program through the time I've been there since '73. Starting out with the undergraduate program and doing clinical and doing a lot of the theory for the undergraduate students, helping to revise the curriculum, being a chairperson of the second level of the program, being the undergraduate assistant dean for a period, developed the doctoral program, taught in the doctoral program, took a sabbatical, got research funded, did all those kinds of things that you do to make your academic life what it should be.
My observation is that she believes that one is always moving toward something more than they are. But while there may be some vision of a potential there, the exact nature of that end stage isn't known. I think that's one of the reasons why nurses find her dynamic and challenging to work with, that notion of a vision that not only nurses but nursing can be more than we've ever visualized, that we have more potential, and that if we work toward that potential, that something great is out there for us.
I think she's very oriented to the impact of nursing on society, not just at the individual level, that nursing takes place in a healthcare institution and this is what nursing does to individual patients or families that are involved with that. But she has a very global perspective, I think, about nursing, what its impact is on society, how it needs to be different. She's very long range in her thinking. I think part of her strategies for developing new programs is to try to capture a different kind of person coming into the field that will be the nurse of the future. So I think she's comprehensive.
Dr. Watson discussed her theory of human caring with Dr. Jacqueline Fawcett on the campus of the University of Colorado in Denver.
Jean, I'd like to thank you very much for agreeing to this interview. I'm sure that our viewers are going to be very interested in your responses to our questions.
Well, I'm delighted to be here. It's really a pleasure and a privilege for me.
I'd like to start by pointing out that your two books on caring trace the development of your thinking about the essential nature of nursing. Would you tell us about your journey of theory development?
Well, first I would have to say that I didn't have any intention of developing any sort of theory. When I first started doing my work, it was before even theory was talked about or thought about. What I was really most interested in doing was trying to problem solve some of my own frustrations about nursing and create some order and meaning and structure. And in doing so, I came up with that organizing framework of the curative factors in the first work, and I was somewhat into the book with several chapters before I even discovered or whatever came up with this creative way of trying to provide the order and meaning using the framework of caring. And once I did it, it became easier for me to see how that was helping me to solve some kind of empirical and conceptual problems. And it was really almost a treatise on nursing, just for myself.
What progress did you see in your own thinking from the first book to the second book?
The second book was much more fluid, and it's interesting the responses I get between the two books. Some people prefer the second book, some people prefer the first book, and some have trouble, with one or the other, but find one that suits them better. For myself, the second book was a freeing experience for me to try to take the risk and put some of the things in writing that I wanted to say about nursing and to nurses about nursing, and using the human science and the human care structure, again, continued to be a framework that gave me the freedom to move into some of the concepts which are actually somewhat transcendent and metaphysical even at this point in time.
How would you describe your journey from the second book to the recent article in Nursing Science Quarterly?
Getting more and more clear on what I'm really trying to accomplish in my thinking. And that really has to do with clarifying a new ontology for nursing and establishing caring as a special way of being that also requires knowing and doing. It generates new notions of personhood that allows for evolving consciousness, notions like transcendence and process, relativity of time and space, and so forth. So it really sets up, for me, a little more order drawing from several different frameworks to say the same thing, using the holographic paradigm, using poetry, using the existing contemporary theories that provide a theme for some of those issues, and then placing them within a caring field consciousness.
How does your theory of human caring differ from other perspectives of nursing?
Well, I think I'm attempting to be more clear about notions of ontology and epistemology, for one thing. I'm also trying to be more attentive to the methodological consequences once you have a certain science orientation and how that directs your phenomena of study and how you go about studying it. So your methods of inquiry are somewhat linked, or I'm trying to link methods of inquiry to the theoretical notions and the philosophical notions. And then lastly, I think it flows then into some praxis issues about nursing and how we begin to use practice to inform theory and research and methods and so forth. Other issues about my work, I think, are focusing on caring as an epistemic endeavor. And if people don't understand that, they might just disregard it or discard the notion of caring as being too soft or not something we ought to pay attention to. And so what I'm trying to do is make a case for a systematic study of caring, but having that knowledge and that knowledge development placed within a meaningful ethical and philosophical and moral context. And I think it's the values context of caring that has really been neglected. And therefore, it's taken us down a path that I don't think is serving us or society with their mission.
In your second book, You've said that the theory of human caring is based upon a perspective that is spiritual, existential, and phenomenologic in orientation, but also draws upon some Eastern philosophy. Could you tell us about that?
Well, when I wrote that book, I started that book in Australia, and it was part of my sabbatical, and I was traveling through several different cultures and several different countries. So I was very attentive to other worldviews at the time I was writing that work, and as noted in the book, did some very special work for myself. It was very special with the Aborigines in Australia, and also had some very meaningful experiences in India and in New Zealand and Taiwan and Thailand and as well as Australia. And I became much more attentive and responsive and sensitive to some of the notions of the spiritual evolution of humankind, so to speak, and began to feel more confident about speaking of those and trying to integrate the evolving consciousness notion and Sister Mother Teresa's view that in the Western world we have this poverty of spirituality, but we have all this richness of materialism. And I could literally see the difference in the different cultures. I mean, you can see the spiritual richness in India. You can see it, you can feel it. It's in the energy, it's in the air. And you can see and feel the spiritual poverty in the Western world. So I was trying to incorporate that into the very beautiful moment of a human-to-human caring transaction that nurses live in their daily life, and they know it and they live it, but we don't have it in our language, and we often don't even have language for it. That's why I'm so interested in integrating arts and humanities, use of poetry and metaphor into our language to try to get us to see what's before our very eyes and nose, but we often can't see it.
How would you deal with people who deny any spirituality, not just deny an orientation of a specific religion, but deny spirituality in more general terms?
I don't think so, because what I'm referring to while I'm using the word spirituality, I'm really incorporating a metaphysical concept, and how you define that or want to define that, it can be left open. I'm really talking about the human spirit and the life force, and being in touch with another person's human spirit, and also the spirit of the universe, and acknowledging that there's a larger force in the universe than the physical being, and maybe we need to pay more attention to that in terms of our caring and our caring field, as well as the human environment energy field, and how caring is linked to healing. And nurses are healers, but we often don't allow ourselves to practice as healers or use that other realm of being, so to speak. And that isn't to say we don't pay attention to the physical, but sometimes the physical can be a very reductionistic kind of reducing person to object status in a moral as well as actual physical sense, and that's what we don't want to do.
How then does healing differ from curing?
Healing is consistent with Florence Nightingale's framework, in that you're really using nature and the universe and the energy of humans and nature and the environment to work with the inner resources of the person. So it's really facilitating self-generated coping mechanisms, if you want to use those words, versus the manipulation, the control, the external generated coping mechanisms that come from the traditional medical dominant model.
Of curing.
Of curing, yes.
Turning the question around from what has influenced you, how do you think that your work has influenced nursing? For example, what impact has your work had on nursing education?
Well, I think it's uneven and somewhat scattered. I think increasingly there has been some attention to caring in the literature, in nursing curricula. There's been quite a bit of return to addressing that. Certainly the hospitals and the healthcare systems are crying in terms of the caring issues, but it's treated as a cliche or a slogan or some kind of commodity to be bought and sold, rather than the kind of philosophical, moral, epistemic context that I'm trying to address caring in. But I think it's there. It's there in public policy. We've been privileged in the last, actually this semester, to be funded by Blue Cross and Blue Shield to have a major public forum on caring and how do we begin to restore it and attend to it from a financial as well as an ethical perspective back into our healthcare systems. And that type of effort is continuing through the Center for Human Caring. So I think it's starting to impact public policy, not so much my theory, but the concept of caring, and then in turn my work is there as it can be available to the public to try to help to problem solve the issues. More specifically in the nursing literature, though, I suppose the theories that are looked at, if you want to think of the wide range of theories, master students and doctoral students do study my work along with others and treat it in a variety of ways, some from a concept, others to an educational orientation, others to a quote theory, critiquing it, studying it, and so forth. So I get literature and letters and so forth from students. So it has that impact. I think also I'm informed by lots of people writing to me about what they're doing. So I've developed like a dear colleague letter when I get letters from people to try to include everybody's work that I know, what they're doing and how they're doing it and how they're trying to address the issue of caring. So quite a bit of research is starting to be generated, but there's a time lag. I think my first book was ahead of the time and probably the second one, and I'm hoping my third one I'm working on is going to be the 21st century one. So, you know, it's sort of the way I've got to do it. It's just part of trying to follow my own self here. But I am excited to see the amount of research that's starting to be generated around this caring context, whether it's my work or others, but pulling together that as a serious epistemic focus for nursing science. And the latest excitement for me was really the Wingspread Conference on generating care and knowledge of care and caring.
That was the conference held in February of 1989.
Correct. It was, funded and sponsored by the Johnson Foundation, by Sigma Theta Tau International, by the American Academy of Nursing, and several universities, including the University of Colorado, University of Washington, and Ohio State University, and some others. And it brought together an invited group to really address the issue of generating knowledge of care and caring for nursing. And it was also, the conference also included consumers and lay people from their perspective, and it was very exciting for me to see a congruence between the paper that I delivered and the message, which is probably controversial, and I don't know if you want to include this, but it was entitled Human Caring, a Public Agenda, Talking About a Revolution. And I used that theme and that rhythm all the way through it in terms of a revolution in human consciousness and a revolution in our science and our approaches to it, and a revolution in terms of the void in the healthcare system of caring the populations that are neglected by the dominant medical model in terms of the homeless, the AIDS, the prenatal care, women's health care, the whole range of issues that are facing us as a society, and the healthcare insurance companies that don't allow us mechanisms to address these populations. So that's a very exciting public policy level issue as well as a scientific issue.
Would you tell us more specifically about the research that comes from the theory of human caring?
Well, I'm aware in bits and pieces of some of the things that are going on, and I'm really impressed with some of the work of Dr. Gloria Clayton, who's at the Medical College of Georgia, and she's doing work with the elderly and looking at the notion of transpersonal caring, and she has a chapter in Reel's latest book which talks about her research in relation to using the caring framework. Also, one of our faculty members here at the University of Colorado, Dr. Nancy Hester, is really trying to empirically validate, if you will, the curative factors in relation to children with pain, experiencing pain. and the nursing interventions around that. That's been supported also by Dr. Marilyn Ray, or Dee Ray, who is also working with Dr. Hester, but has her own research on technological caring and has done some research on the moral aspect of the caring ethic that's combined with the technological expertise of the nurse in a critical care setting. So that's quite exciting to see that elucidation of some of those issues in critical care nursing. Certainly the work of Dr. Dolores Scott is not necessarily following my work, but her contribution to the nursing literature on understanding the philosophical kind of meaning and the necessary and sufficient ingredients for caring, so to speak, from a philosophical analysis is quite contributing to our foundation. Dr. Linda Brown, who's at Yale University, is continuing to look at caring in relation to patients' perceptions of nursing care behaviors. And I believe some of her work has now been published. Dr. Christine Swanson-Kaufman has continued to do her research on caring since she was a doctoral student with me, and has now received postdoctoral fellowship as well as a first award to pursue her really caring framework that's emerged from her research here on women who have miscarried and the loss experience and the caring needs. There's a major funded research project in Canada by Dr. Georgette Dijon, who is using the caring framework of the transpersonal caring aspect with a longitudinal study of patients who are physically handicapped, and that has been a 2 or 3 year project and has been refunded to my knowledge.
How does your work influence what nurses think about nursing?
I think caring gives nursing hope for what nursing is. That framework gives nurses hope, because again it restores the values and the philosophy and some of the moral context that nurses deal with, and gives a framework for providing order and meaning to that human dimension of nursing that attracts people into nursing. And it also is very consistent with the changing nature of science, that here we can look at a context for developing knowledge that is not limited by the traditional empirical framework. And so we now have a methodological framework that's consistent with our philosophical, theoretical, ethical paradigm, if you want to think of it that way. So I think it really restores hope to the profession and gives people meaning and kind of inspiration. At least that's my sense of it.
How then does your work influence what nurses do as nurses?
Well, when you change the way you see things and change the way you think and you change your consciousness, it may not tell you specifically to do X, Y, and Z, but it will point you in one direction and not toward another. So it will change the very phenomena that you see right in your very midst. And I think we've been somewhat blinded by the human phenomena. We've been so socialized and so restricted into the body physical phenomena of nursing that we have not allowed ourselves the consciousness or the lens to see all the beauty and the wonder and the mystery and the unknowns that can come into play within the caring perspective. It also restores energy for the nurse. It allows new energy to come into the system that's become very stagnant, because a new energy field gets created between the nurse and the patient. So the nurse can be restored and recharged through that, as can the patient.
Jean, in your recent Nursing Science Quarterly paper, you proposed what you called a radical thesis, and I quote, "There is movement out of an era in which curing is dominant to an era in which caring must take precedence." Is this a radical thesis because it restores our original roots in caring before the advances of modern medicine with the focus on curing?
Mm-hmm.
Or is it a radical thesis because it is a new idea?
I think it's a radical thesis, and I'm actually drawing upon Daniel Callahan and Sally Gadeau's thinking with some of this notion. that it inverts the order of things, and it's radical in that sense that we have been so dominated by the curing as the end and caring as a means to an end, and often is not seen to be something we need to pay as much attention to as the cure, techno-cure, actually outcomes. And what is being proposed there is that we invert the order of things and have caring as an end in and of itself, and as the highest form of commitment to patients and families and society. But then from that we have to have new knowledge and be clear about our values and ethics and so forth. But whenever we do that, then that very notion then begins to provide a framework whereby we can re-examine, evaluate the criteria we're using for the cure and the techno-cure outcomes. So it really establishes the original order of health and illness and the framework of Florence Nightingale. And it puts nurses where they have always been, but it restores them to the front line in terms of health, caring, and healing, and then it properly places medicine as the second line in terms of the intervention.
Would you tell us what you mean by transpersonal caring? What form or forms does transpersonal caring take?
I'm using transpersonal caring in a very specific way in that I'm trying to emphasize that the nurse is affected in the relationship and in the transaction, as is the patient. And we have such an orientation in nursing of doing to someone else rather than us also receiving something back and having a reciprocal kind of relationship. So I'm trying to acknowledge that both humans are influenced for better or for worse, depending on what happens in that caring occasion. And also trying to acknowledge that a new energy field can be forthcoming depending on the consciousness of the nurse and depending on how someone, the nurse and the patient, choose to use that moment. Even though it may be brief, there's like a universe that is present in that one moment. And some new things can happen depending on the human dimensions and the connectedness between the human center of the nurse and the human center of the patient. Something new is created as a new energy field, and that provides different kinds of outcome possibilities.
For example?
Well, if you were to just look at your traditional nurse going in and a mechanical adjusting of an IV and paying no attention to the patient, that is a for worse kind of scenario of a moment of transaction between the patient and the nurse. If the nurse goes in with a caring consciousness and attends to that person and the patient in whatever ways that may be natural and full use of herself or himself in that moment, whether it be touch, whether it be communication, whether it be just a moment of presence, what else is being communicated in that intervention, in that instance. And depending on the nurses being able to be present in that and communicate something else, that can have a profound outcome on that patient, because patients don't want just the mechanical. They're needing something else there. And the nurse, in that kind of perpetual mechanical intervention without a different kind of consciousness, ends up with burnout more than ever, because all that energy is going into trying to protect herself rather than to being present. So it really changes a different way of thinking about nurse-patient relationships when you think of the transpersonal notion.
Jean, are there situations for which your theory of human caring is not appropriate?
Well, no, I can't. I think it's appropriate to nursing, and nursing is practiced everywhere, and I think it has relevance for nursing, both as a science and a practice, and education. I mean, it sounds sort of grandiose, perhaps, but I think it's not me. It's just that perspective is it's foundational to nursing.
What do you think nursing would be like if administrators of nursing use the theory of human caring to direct or to administer nursing services?
It would revolutionize the healthcare system, and we would have all kinds of different models of care delivery. We would have different patterns of delivery of nursing care. We would have continuity of care. We would have the gestalt that some have written about in terms of the future for the healthcare, where the nurse is really the only continuous care provider that has the gestalt of the knowledge, the theory, the technologies, the ethics, and the values that's able to pull this system together. And the nurse really becomes the direct care provider, but also the care coordinator that allows some continuity to emerge. The interface between hospitals and home, the ability to deliver critical care in the home, which is now what's happening, as well as to monitor and manage the multiple kind of curing interventions that are occurring from so many different providers.
Jean, would you tell us what has given you the most satisfaction in your nursing career?
That's a nice question. I think the unlimited possibilities in nursing, in terms of the thinking as well as the action and the doing. I mean, it's just absolutely unlimited because nursing deals with humans and life and the broader universe. So it really creates all kinds of opportunities to be expressive and creative, and be it through your faculty role or travel and work with other people and challenge yourself with new ideas and new cultures. It's the very nature of nursing itself gives me satisfaction because it's something you live. It's not like you have this one isolated part of yourself. You kind of live it.
Although you have many years of contributions still to make, I wonder, Jean, if you could tell us what do you regard as your most significant contribution to the discipline of nursing to date?
Well, I guess my 2 books, and I'm hoping that I will be even more prolific in the future and be more courageous about saying some of the things and putting coherent, articulate framework on my ideas so that other people can be stimulated by them.
Would you tell us about your plans for the future? What are you doing now, and what are your long-range plans?
Currently, I'm Dean of Nursing at the University of Colorado and director of this new Center for Human Caring, and that has been a very satisfying experience, although it's still very early in its formation. What I see myself doing in the future is open. I want to do more writing, and I want to continue to develop my ideas and to use my talent. And I guess I'm sensing that I want to take these notions to a higher level in terms of public policy.
Jean, I'd like to thank you very much for the interview. Our conversation has been stimulating and exciting, and I know that the viewers are going to be intrigued by your ideas.
Well, thank you. It's been a treat for me as well. I've enjoyed it very much.
Jean's perspective is not just theoretical, that it's not just a catchy idea, that it's not just an abstraction, but that her vision is really one of tremendous importance for the real future, not the abstract conceptual future, but the real future of health and healing. Nurses are prevented from caring. They're left caring for machines and charts and paperwork and physicians a lot of times, and increasingly have no time left to be with patients. That's why nurses burn out. So I think that when Jean Watson presents a theory and a framework of nursing as human caring, that can be, if nurses will embrace it, an empowerment for them. They can say, hey, we're practicing nursing based on a conceptual framework, based on a theory that's been put forth by an eminent nursing scholar. Don't tell me that we don't have time to sit with a patient. This is nursing defined by this scholar. So it's not just an abstraction. You know, it has very real implications, I think, for for a real health care system compared to a sick care system?
Well, I think we create our own destiny, but I think we create the possibilities by changing the way in which we want to envision the future. And I think we start imaging and imagining what we want and what we can imagine that we want to choose for ourselves, and then we let it come to us. But we have to have it in our consciousness before that can